Very nice to meet you all. I'm Shei, and today we're going to be talking about decreasing onboarding friction for crypto non-natives. And while obviously accelerating crypto adoption is a nice thing, this is more focused on developers and product owners who want to think about how do I increase users for my Web3 product. Now, before I begin, I want to start with a hypothetical story, and this is hypothetical only because if there's any legal enforcement here, this never actually happened. But let's say in 2013, I went to college in the US, and in the US, the drinking age is 21. And obviously, when you're underage, you kind of need to get a fake ID to be able to go out with your friends, right? So at the time, according to Reddit, the best place to get a fake ID was a place called Silk Road. And Silk Road was interesting because the only way to buy paraphernalia from Silk Road was to use this magic internet money called Bitcoin. And you can imagine in 2013 that procuring Bitcoin was not an easy task, right? It involved finding a Bitcoin seller. You'd then have to commission an escrow. That escrow would hold the Bitcoin. You'd pay with cash at a Western Union, get the receipt, send it over, and once they confirmed the funds were delivered, they'd finally release the Bitcoin, and now you can buy your fake ID. And the main takeaway behind this, though, is that if there is enough motivation, right, if there's enough motivation, people will figure crypto out, regardless of the friction. So you really want to think about how you can create that motivation. And the key behind creating motivation at the end of the day is just to create value. For me, if I didn't have the fake ID, I wouldn't be able to go out with my friends, et cetera, et cetera. So I really had to figure out what I needed to do to get my hands on some Bitcoin. So this leads us to the first principle, which is Fogg's behavioral model, which is this kind of dichotomy behind both the friction and ability to do something and the motivation, right? If you have high motivation, even if it's very difficult, you'll still go ahead and make it happen. But the dream really is to be on the top right of this graph, right? You want to be high motivation, but very easy to do, very low friction. So increasing motivation, that's something for you guys to figure out, right? How you guys create value, how you guys deliver value, that's up to the product owners. But we can talk about decreasing friction, which will hopefully allow you to convert more people. So let's talk about the current state of the world, right? What does it look like right now to run an on-chain transaction? Well, let's say you're a smart contract developer, you developed a contract, it's like you have to deposit USDC, and then you can secure a spot to buy an apartment, which seems pretty easy. You pull up your MetaMask, you sign a transaction, you deposit some USDC in, you should be able to be good to go. But if you think of this a little bit more holistically, it's actually quite complex, right? Somebody first has to open up a Coinbase exchange to use as their on-off ramp. Then they have to send some US dollars or fiat into that exchange from the bank. You have to buy USDC. You have to open up a MetaMask. You have to buy some ETH to pay for gas. Now you have to send USDC and ETH to the wallet. Now you got to go to the front end, approve the transaction before you can finally sign the transaction, right? And so you're thinking, okay, well, why just, maybe I'll write a guide, right? But guides are actually terrible. They're not a solution. They're barely even a Band-Aid, right? The key to this at the end of the day is abstraction. And abstraction is this idea in engineering where you try to abstract away the complexities, right? You want to hide away the details and the things that people don't need to know about. Because if they don't need to know about it, they shouldn't have to worry about it, right? Because people don't want to learn about how to solve the problem. They just want their problem solved. I don't care about how bananas are grown or harvested. I just want to be able to eat bananas in the morning. So the biggest friction points for on-chain transactions right now are two main things. One is the KYB and the KYC, and obviously the on-off ramp. And the second is really all these Web3 complexities: wallet creation, paying for gas fees, signing transactions, which we'll probably tackle the second part first because there's a topic in the Web3 community right now which is very popular, which tackles all of this, and that's account abstraction. Following what we've already learned about abstraction, account abstraction is very similar, right? It's just abstracting away the complexity of Web3, right? In other words, creating wallets, paying for gas, managing private keys, all of that is hidden away from the user. There's also ERC 4337, which a lot of people talk about when they talk about account abstraction, but that specifically is just a technical kind of protocol or standard that allows for this higher level of, this higher idea of account abstraction. So To understand account abstraction, it's important to understand that there's two types of wallets. There's externally owned accounts, and then there's smart contract wallets. Externally owned accounts are managed by a private key, whereas smart contract wallets are managed by code. Now, the difference between these two are actually quite important. On the protocol level, externally owned accounts are what is known as first-class citizens, right? They can do everything. They can initiate transactions, they can have a balance, et cetera, et cetera. Whereas smart contract wallets, they're second-class citizens. They don't have all the rights. They actually cannot initiate transactions. But the difference between these two for externally owned accounts is externally owned accounts are very primitive. It's very difficult to upgrade. There's things you can do, maybe some NPC stuff, but generally the basic concepts is you can't add new features to it. It's also very brittle. If you lose the private key, you're screwed. Whereas smart contract wallets, you can start adding very interesting things. You can batch transactions, because all of this is done by code. Whatever you can code up new features, you can code up new security protocols, right? It allows you to really be able to upgrade and improve these things. But you're limited because EOA, externally owned accounts, at the end of the day are first-class citizens. So what you have to do is you have to use these EOA accounts to be this kind of like skeleton top layer holder that ends up signing transactions, but all the meat and all the logic and all the funds are held on the bottom layer smart contract wallet. And if you can do this correctly, you get to this holy grail of account abstraction where any Web3 transaction just feels like a Web2 action, right? And all of those complexities we were talking about are just abstracted away. Choosing a network, paying for gas fees, figuring out public and private keys. So let's talk about also KYB and KYC and the on-off ramp, because it's another piece of that friction point. And the key to remember here is really, it's a sort of a solved problem. I don't know if you guys ever like signed up for like a neobank or something. The KYB, KYC process there is really quite smooth if you ever use TransferWise or Revolut. So if you can take that KYB, KYC process, and the best way to do that is really to have as much control as possible, and then you really want to integrate that on-off ramp directly into your app, then you can have a real nice end-to-end solution if you tie this in with what we just talked about regarding account abstraction. And really the dream at the end of the day is you don't have to worry about KYB, KYC, right? It's just done on the base level layer. When you open up a bank account or when you open up a debit card, you've already done the KYC, right? Imagine you have to go to Amazon and every time you create an account on Amazon, you have to KYB. It just doesn't make sense, right? So you ultimately want to have something end to end, but it requires a lot of regulation, and that's an entire other conversation. So let's talk a little bit about how we do it at OneSafe to try to make sure everything is very seamless. OneSafe, just a business bank for Web3 companies, right? What we do is you come in, you log in with Google, and you go through that regular neobank kind of setup. And from there, we actually set up a lot of things for you in the back end. We set up a bank account so that you have fiat transactions, so now you can send fiat in. We set up a custodial wallet so that you can now deposit crypto and actually have access to it. With our custodial wallet, we can then link those to various liquidity providers. So now you have access to Coinbase, Circle, and now you can actually have one-to-one USD to USDC. You don't have to set up all of these things separately. You don't have to go to Coinbase and create an account, Fireblocks, create an account. Everything is set up. Now, we also add in a signing wallet. That signing wallet is then used to control the multi-sig. The signing wallet, the private key is stored locally, so it's self-custodial. It's on your computer, but we can have access to it, and that's tied to your Google login. Then, with that, we can take the signed transactions, pass it to a relayer, and then abstract away gas fees, so you don't have to pay for gas fees. And then all of that, tied to what Notes is safe, allows you the security of a multi-sig. So you come in, you create your Google login, you go through your KYB, and now you have all of this stuff that allows for a very seamless process. Imagine you went back to that smart contract example we talked about earlier. You can deposit 1,000 USDC very smoothly, right? But you can see how much goes on in the back end to make for a very seamless experience, right? And that comes to the paradox of great UI, which is making something look and feel very easy is actually really hard. So let's just go for a quick recap. The first thing, always start with motivation, right? Start with the value. Start with what you're providing people. And if there's nothing there, then it doesn't matter how frictionless your process is. Then remember Fogg's behavioral model and that dichotomy between friction and motivation. Remember that people don't want to learn how to solve the problem. People just want their problem solved for them. And when you look at your product, you want to make sure that you have a really holistic reach of what it takes from end to end to get to actually using your app. Now let's just go for a nice little thought experiment to end this conversation off. So in the world right now, for bank accounts, there's probably about 3.8 billion adults, which is about 69% of the adults, have access to a bank. So why do people open up bank accounts, right? What's that motivation that we just talked about? Well, maybe financial security. It makes it really easy to send and receive funds, right? It's the gateway to other fintech products. And how hard is it to open up a bank account? Well, it's not too bad, right? Neobanks have made it a lot easier. KYB and KYC is necessary, don't get me wrong, but it's pretty smooth. So if we take this now and we move it over to crypto adoption, and I'm like, hey, why should we adopt crypto? We can talk about the same benefits, right? Financial safety, ability to pay and receive funds, right? Gateway to other fintech Web3 products, right? So then why does it have to be so painful to get into Web3, right? It doesn't have to be. And if we can really fix this, if we can really fix the adoption of crypto, right? We can really onboard the next 3.8 billion users onto crypto. So hopefully this was helpful for you guys. I have a couple minutes left if there's general questions, but you can follow me on Twitter at Satoshi. I talk about crypto, tech, and Web3, and I really appreciate the time today.
Thank you, Chris. Big applause, and a big thank you. So I've seen already some questions in the audience, so I'm quite excited to hear them.
My main question is, if someone, and I know a few, me included, do not want to use Google account for login, like what do you do?
For our app specifically?
Correct,
or
yes.
For what? So we right now do Google or email login, but if you want to like have your own MetaMask login or something, like that's not supported right now for us, just because we don't, we're a small team, we only have to set up some things, but you can think about who your target customers are, right? Our target customers, generally Web3 companies that don't want to have to worry about setting in a new login using MetaMask or et cetera. But if you, for example, want to use, if you want to set something up for your own customers, you think about what their main login activity is, right? We have login via Google or email, but that's how most people do logins, not username and password, but you can set it up how you want. Use Magic Link, use Web3 Auth, whatever it happens to be.
Are there any other questions? So I don't think I've seen anyone having a question. So I think we are all experts now on how to build these water slides. Big applause again for Chris. Thank you.